Hi, Year 6. I'm just going to run through the comprehension questions for The Girl Living Can Stars, chapters 10 to 17. So it's much the same as before. I've pulled out the vocabulary from each chapter and then some questions that I would like you to consider. As always, please make sure that your answers are really detailed, that you use evidence from the text, and you fully explain yourself, because we're really thinking about those 3-mark questions and making sure that you've got those skills, because they're really, really important. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Here we go. So chapters 10 to 17, you can see it's the Forgotten Territories. I have put the map at the beginning of the PowerPoint, and I will obviously upload this all to Showbie. So same as before, in between each set of questions and vocabulary to work on, please re-listen to or reread the chapter and write a short summary of what happens in that chapter so that you're really clear on the key events. And it's a really good skill to be able to synthesize, which means to summarize clearly what has happened in a chapter. So some of this vocabulary will be repeated, but it does get less and less as we go towards the end of this section, because we've got much more sort of repetition going on. So we start off chapter 10, quite a lot of vocabulary, by chapter 17, very few. So adjusted, trampled, sap, undergrowth, bearings, whinnying, spurs, stirrups, fossilized, scrubland, skeletal, dismounted, mare, rifled, sheath, tutted, ventured, elders, drought, copse, cascading, disdain, jarred, tethering, waded, staler, kindling, bow, upended, fantastical, fumbled, and decisive. Some excellent words in there. So these 3 questions: why do you think the animals are acting so strangely? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. Again, really clear, please, detailed responses. Isabella lied to the governor about the glowing wood stick. Why do you think she did that? So also have a little think about what we know so far about the wood stick, where it's come from, her family history, etc. The map changed when it fell in the river. What does that make you think? Now, this is quite an interesting question, because obviously the map is Mar's map, and we don't know that much about Mar in comparison to what we know about Isabella's dad. So this is a really interesting one. I want you to think about the 2 types of water that she pours on it, and whether that's significant in any way. Why do you think Isabella is so determined to map the Forgotten Territories? Again, detailed answers, please. Chapter 11, claustrophobic, sifted, glint, skittered, flank, stallion, leaden, raised, unrelenting, scavenged, abundant, gate, baying, assailant, ambush, tether. This book has really high level vocabulary in it, so really good to keeping a vocab book. Why do you think Gris looks the way it does? Now, we obviously know there's the skeletons, there's the teeth in the cross on the floor. So have a little think about that. Devastated city was not what the group were expecting to find. So what were they expecting to find, first of all, is the sort of implicit part, or the hidden part of that question. And then how do you think the governor and Isabella felt? So the 2 different perspectives there'll be here, after realizing what the city was like now. So what was Isabella's reaction? What was governor's reaction? And what do you think that makes them think about going forward? Isabella realized she'd not seen any ravens since entering the Forgotten Territories. What do you think is the significance of this? Where has Loop's bracelet come from, and what can you infer from this? Obviously, we know what happens a little bit later on, so that you probably know the answer to that one, but it's in there anyway. Chapter 12, scald, pigment, incense, papyrus, subtly, flex, surf, surveyed, matting, remnants, hauled, weightlessness, inventive, egret, whiplashes, plummet, vessel, bemused. In the flashback, Isabella remembers lying to her father about where she would like to go. So he says that he would like to go to India. And she agrees with him, but she's lying. So why do you think she lied? Where does she actually want to go, and why? Isabella said, and why does she not want to tell her father that? I think is an interesting question. Isabella says that she's beginning to think that the events, kata, animals in the bay, the destroyed village, the attack, are all connected. What do you think, and what do you think the significance of this is? We see the quote, each of us carries the map of our lives on our skin, in the way we walk, even in the way we grow, again in this chapter. But it's slightly different. It's given a little bit more of a context here. What is the example that that's a typo, that Dar gives Isabella of why this is true? All things have a cycle, Isabella, a habit of returning the way they came, seasons, water, lives, perhaps even trees. You don't always need a map to find your path back, though it often helps. What do you think Dar meant by this? This is when Isabella is telling Pablo what Dar has told her. So I wonder what does he mean? What do you think he means? Why is that significant? Sorry, there's lots of dogs barking in the background where I am. Chapter 13, flinch, punishment, redemption, estuary, guttural, ajar, insistent, smog. We learn the governor killed his own father. What is your reaction to this? Obviously, your reaction is going to be one of disgust and horror. But what is your reaction based on his previous behavior? Because the governor's quite an interesting character. We hear him very negatively painted at the beginning, but then during this expedition, he's allowed Isabella to come. There's been a slight change, and his sort of reaction towards Luke being missing, that obviously means something. So what is your reaction to this? Are you surprised? Are you disappointed? And can you explain yourself? The governor says he was sent to Joya for punishment and redemption. What do you think this means? I want you to think really carefully about those words, and where he might have come from and why he would have been sent somewhere for both of those things. It's quite an odd combination if you understand the meaning. So have a little think about that and explain what your thoughts are. We hear more from the governor in this chapter than in any other so far. What do you think about his relationship with Luke, his daughter? So it's an interesting relationship, I think, that they have. What's your impression of it? Can you explain yourself with evidence there, of course? Chapter 14, musty, bolted, parched, gestured, tripwire, mud-clad spasm. Isabella finds Luke in this chapter. What is your impression of the two girls' friendship at this point? Luke explains she was saved by the Tibicenas. How are they described by Luke and Doce? Doce explains that the Tibicenas have come to clear the island before Yota takes it. How has this changed your impression of where the story is going or how it might end? I keep thinking back to that quotation from earlier on, is that all stories need to finish, but they don't always have happy endings. And I think that is a significant quote, and that this section of the text makes me question where that's going. So what do you think? The governor does not seem to react when he realizes that Isabella is not Gabbo. Why do you think that is? Do you think he knew? Do you think he was surprised? You would have thought he'd be angry based on his previous behavior, but he doesn't seem to have any reaction. So what do you think about that? Oh, and just going back to your impression of their friendship, they left on very bad terms before. How is it different now? Chapter 15, formation, procession, haltingly, constellations, imperceptibly, bog-like, disorientating, legible, rent, wretched, and thicket. Lupe is quite different at this point in the story to when we met her earlier. So I think her character has changed quite a lot in the time that we've known her. Has your impression of her changed? What is your impression now? I'm expecting your impression will have changed, so that's why I want you to explain it. Explain your answer with evidence from the text. If your impression hasn't changed of her, I would like you to think about what she was like at the beginning and what she's like now, because there is a significant difference, I think, in her behaviour. At the end of the chapter, the governor stays behind to fight the Tibicena, allowing Lupe and Isabella to escape. What is your reaction to this? I was surprised that he did that. I wonder what you think about it and whether you think there's a reason. So explain what you think. Explain your opinion, your reaction. 16. Manoeuvring, levering, purchase, putrid, gristle, decomposing, femurs, unfurled, dispassionate. What do you think the letter said? So Lupe reads the letter that was inside the locket because she realizes, well, Isabella makes her realize that her father has been killed, presumably by the Tirbicena. What do you think the letter said? Because her reaction was very unfavourable to it. Based on what you know of the governor so far, what do you think might be inside it? And why do you think Lupe reacts in that way? What would you do if you read that letter? And then what is casting the large shadow at the end of the chapter, and how do you think the girls feel about it? And finally, chapter 17, as you can see, only 3 words that I pulled out of this one. The rest of them, they're all, either you've seen them already or you should know them already. Husky, docile, and crook. Oh, and just a point again about vocabulary. Remember to look it up in this context, because lots of words have multiple definitions, but I want to know what they mean in this context. Pablo does not seem to believe the girls when they tell him about the Tibicenas. Why do you think this is? Luke seems very cold towards Pablo. Why do you think this is? I think that's an interesting one. I think there are potentially multiple reasons, so I'd like at least 2 reasons, please. What is your impression of Pablo and Isabella's relationship? Has it changed since the start of the book? Evidence again for that. There's lots of pieces of evidence that you can use there. The end of this chapter is shocking. When I read it the first time, I was quite disturbed and upset by it, I think. What is your reaction to it? And what do you think will happen next? Again, detailed answers, please. I think that's the end. There we go. So you can either watch the video again, click pause at each slide and just work through it that way, or I will upload a PDF of the PowerPoint and just a simple Word document with the vocabulary and the questions in for you to work through. As ever, please upload your responses to Showbie, to me and to Shona, or I might even ask you about them. We might ask you about them in our video calls this week. So look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.